is it?
Hello, Ivor. Please take these flowers. They're for you.
You are Helen, Edward's wife. And Edward is dead.
Yes. Let's talk of him.
Please, take a seat. That's a very pretty hat.
Thank you, Ivor. It was the last present that Edward ever bought for me.
Edward, no longer with us. Do you remember around the fire at Ivy Cottage? Eleanor, Arthur, Wilfrid, Robert, and John. When we were all free men, not in chains like we are now. Edward, it was the wireless that killed Edward. Begin to get me through the wireless.
This is for you, Ivor. I thought you would like it. It's one of Edward's old Ordnance Survey maps of Gloucestershire.
Lonely, Elmore, Down Hatherley, Upper Hatherley, quickly, quickly.
The orchis, trefoil, harebells nod all day, high above Gloucester and the Severn plain. Few come there, where the curlew ever and again cries faintly, and no traveller makes stay, since steep the road is, and the villages hidden by hedges, wonderful in May. At ww1, a soldier wandering the lanes at evening talked with me and told of gardens summer blessed, of early spring in tiny orchards, the uncounted gold strewn in green meadows, clear-cut shadows, black on the dust, and grey stone, mellow and old. But these were things I knew, and carelessly heard, while in thought I went with friends, on roads white in the sun, and wandered far to see the scented hay come homeward in warm loads. Hardly I heeded him, while coloured dim evening brought stars and lights in small abodes. When on a sudden, quickly, he said, how I started at that old darling name of home, and turned, fell into a torrent of words warm-hearted, till clear above the stars of summer burned in velvety smooth skies. We shared memories and the old raptures from each other learned. O sudden steep, O hill towering above, chasm from the road falling suddenly away. Sure no two men talked of you with more love than we, that tender coloured ending of the day. O tears, keen pride in you, feeling the soft dew, walking in thought another Roman way. You hills of home, woodlands, white roads and inns that star and line our darling land, still keep memory of us. For when first day begins, we think of you, and dream in the first sleep of you and yours. Trees, bare rocks, flowers, daring the blast on Crickley's distant steep.
Ivor Bertie Gurney was born in Gloucester on the 28th of August 1890. The old cathedral city was to remain at the heart of Gurney's inspiration, the focus of his natural creative genius. It was apparent from his early childhood that Ivor was musically gifted, joining the school choir at the age of 8. In 1900 he was awarded a place in the Gloucester Cathedral Choir, and with it a full-time education at the King's School. It was at his local church that Ivor met the Reverend Alfred Hunter Cheeseman, the curate. It was Cheeseman who encouraged Ivor in his musical career throughout his life and helped him to secure a place in the cathedral choir. He introduced Ivor to two professional musicians, the Misses Emily and Margaret Hunt. Emily played the piano and Margaret the violin. It was they who led Ivor to discover the beauties of the Cotswold landscape. In 1906, Gurney became an articled pupil of Dr. Herbert Brewer, organist of Gloucester Cathedral. Ivor's sister, Winifred Gurney, remembered that Dr. Brewer found Ivor difficult at times.
Dr. Brewer gave him little or no encouragement. He did not appear to do anything to praise or help him, but he told my father he would be proud if the music that Ivor had written had been his.
Gurney had a great capacity for friendship. His boyhood circle of friends was increasing, but throughout his life he was only interested in people who had a similar sensitivity to his own. Again, Winifred Gurney remembered that
Ivor had several friends to whom he dedicated music. They would have to be quite a genuine type, or he would instantly drop them. Nothing sneakish or underhand would pass Ivor.
in spite of his generally solitary nature, Ivor made many friends whilst a pupil at the King's School. Although only an average pupil, he loved cricket, football and hockey, as well as the musical activities in the school and cathedral. His artistic temperament made him stand out from the other boys as a bit of an oddity.
Ivor always seemed in a dream. More often than not he'd be walking in the gutter, as if looking for something, his cap all sideways, peak over one eye. He had his occasions when he did not always agree with his playmates. But at one time it was a rule for several of the cathedral choir boys to come to tea on Sundays and walk 4 miles to Maysmore with us, to take grandmother her weekly butter and tea. We went by road, by River Severn, and sometimes through the woods, especially in bluebell time in spring.
Oh, does some blind fool now stand on my hill to see how Ashelworth nestles by the river, where eyes and heart and soul may drink their fill? The Cotswolds range out eastward as if never a curve of them the hand of time might change. Beauty sleeps most confidently for ever. The blind fool stands, his dull eyes free to range endlessly almost, and finds no words to say. Not that the sense of wonder is too strange, too great for speech. Naught touches him. The day blows its glad trumpets, breathes rich odoured breath. Glory after glory passes away, and I'm in France. He looks and sees beneath the clouds in steady Severn, silver and grey, but dead he is, and comfortable in death.
During these years, Ivor was to form friendships with F.W. Harvey, another poet, and Herbert Howells, the celebrated composer. Ivor spent many hours at Harvey's farmhouse home in Minsterworth, the Redlands, where Ivor often helped out picking fruit in the orchard or helping in the fields. It was through Harvey that Ivor met solicitor John Haynes, also a published poet, who was related to Catherine Abercrombie, wife of the poet Lascelles Abercrombie, who, in 1911, had moved into the Gallows at Ryton, a village to the southwest of Dimmock. Abercrombie was the founder of the poets' colony that rented cottages in and around Dimmock, the so-called Dimmock Poets. Included in their numbers were Rupert Brooke, John Drinkwater, Robert Frost, Wilfred Gibson and Edward Thomas, and their presence in Dimmock attracted other literary figures such as W.H. Davis, Eleanor Fargen, Arthur Ransome and Edward Marsh, patron of the arts and publisher of the highly influential Georgian poetry series, which first appeared in 1912. Harvey and Gurney bought a little boat during one summer holiday that Gurney spent at the lockkeeper's cottage at Framilode. Which they sometimes sailed recklessly on the river Severn. In 1909, Dr. Brewer accepted Herbert Howells as an article pupil to join Gurney and another young man, Ivor Davis, who found fame as Ivor Novello. Howells and Gurney were both determined to achieve something worthwhile in music and to find fame. They both shared a deep love of poetry that was rooted in the beauty of the Gloucestershire landscape. In 1910, Howells and Gurney were present at a concert during the Three Choirs Festival, during which a new composition was played, Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Tallis, composed by Ralph Vaughan Williams. In this piece, Vaughan Williams had successfully combined music from the Tudor age with a modern musical language. The music inspired Gurney, Howells and Harvey to become immersed and influenced by the music and literature of the 16th and 17th centuries. Gurney won an open scholarship to the Royal College of Music and enrolled there in the autumn term of 1911, and soon after met Miss Marion Scott, a musician, music historian, editor of the RCM magazine and secretary of the RCM Union. She was immediately impressed, and although 13 years older than him, was to become a staunch friend. Marian supported Gurney by collecting his poems and music, bringing many of them to publication. She brought order to the disordered life of Gurney.
For one thing, the boy was wearing a thick overcoat, more suggestive of an out-of-door life than a composition lesson with Sir Charles Stanford, for which, by the manuscript tucked under his arm, he was clearly bound. But what struck me more was the look of latent force in him, the fine head with the profusion of brown hair, not too well brushed, and the eyes, behind their spectacles, were of mixed colouring, in Gurney's case, hazel, grey, green and agate, which Erasmus once said was regarded by the English as denoting genius. This, I said to myself, is the new composition scholar from Gloucester, whom they call Schubert.
Marian Scott may also have helped Gurney to secure a post as organist at Christ Church, High Wycombe. It was here that he met Edward Chapman, church warden of Christ Church. Edward invited Ivor to join his family at weekends to their family home, a solid Victorian house at St Michael's Castle Hill. This invitation led to a lifelong friendship between Ivor and the Chapman family. Ivor affectionately nicknamed Edward and his wife Matilda Le Comte and La Comtesse, and he delighted in playing with their 4 children, Catherine, Winifred, Arthur, and the baby of the family, Marjorie. Herbert Howells had followed Gurney to the Royal College of Music in 1912, and both studied composition under Stanford, whose students included Vaughan Williams, Gustav Holst, Arthur Bliss, John Ireland, and many more. In later years, Stanford would say that of all his pupils, Gurney was potentially the biggest man of them all, but the least teachable. Gurney's mind was less open to Stanford's academic disciplines and rigour. By 1914, Gurney had found his musical talent, which he describes in a letter.
Dear Willie, it's going, Willie, it's going. Gradually the cloud passes, and beauty is a present thing, not merely an abstraction poets feign to honour. Willie, Willie, I have done 5 of the most delightful and beautiful songs you ever cast your beaming eyes upon. They are all Elizabethan, the words, and blister my kidneys, bisurate my magnesia if the music is not as English, as joyful, as tender as any lyric of all that noble host. Technique, all right, and as to word setting, models, Orpheus, tears, under the greenwood tree, sleep and spring. How did such an undigested clod as I make them? That, Willie, I cannot say, but there they are, 5 songs for mezzo-soprano, 2 flutes, 2 clarinets, a harp and 2 bassoons by Ivor Gurney, A.R.C.O. Yes, Willie, I got through that exam, and meningite my cerebralis if I didn't get 2nd prize.
War came to Europe, and eventually in 1915 Gurney's application was accepted. By enlisting in the army, Gurney hoped to stabilise his fragile mental state. It is thought he suffered from manic depression, and the army, with its comradeship, discipline of arms, and extreme physical exertion, seemed to stem the decline from eccentricity to insanity. He was trained as a signaller in B Company in the 2nd 5th Battalion of the Gloucestershire Regiment. In the trenches in France, Gurney mainly wrote poetry and letters to his many friends. He was appalled by the horror and waste of war, and in the depths of human folly he cried out for truth and beauty in some of his finest verse.
Who died on the wires, and hung there one of two, who for his hours of life had chattered through infinite, lively chatter of Buck's accent, yet faced unbroken wires, stepped over, and went, a noble fool, faithful to his stripes, and ended. But I, weak, hungry, and willing only for the chance of line, to fight in the line, lay down under unbroken wires, and saw the flashes, and kept unshaken. Till the politest voice, a finicking accent, said, "Do you think you might crawl through there? There's a hole." In the afraid darkness shot at, I smiled, as politely replied, "I'm afraid not, sir." There was no hole, no way to be seen, nothing but chance of death after tearing of clothes. Kept flat, and watched the darkness, hearing bullets whizzing, and thought of music, and swore deep heart's deep oaths, polite to God, and retreated, and came on again, again retreated, and a second time faced the screen.
One of the few songs that Gurney was able to write in the trenches and whilst he was at rest behind the lines are some of his best compositions, written when he doubted if he would ever return to his native Gloucestershire. This is one of the few of Gurney's poems set to music. On the 16th of August 1916, Will Harvey's company moved into a position south of Laventille, and the next morning Gurney and Harvey were able to meet briefly. Harvey, now lieutenant, went out alone to reconnoitre in no man's land as a preparation for leading a patrol that night. He did not return. Gurney wrote about it to Marion Scott.
Willie, my best friend, went out on patrol a week ago and never came back. We were firm enough in friendship, and I do not look ever for a closer bond, though I live long and am as lucky in friendship as heretofore.
Gurney's loss of his great friend resulted in a poetic masterpiece called To His Love.
He's gone, and all our plans are useless indeed. We'll walk no more on Cotswold where the sheep feed quietly and take no heed. His body that was so quick is not as you knew it. On Severn River, under the blue, driving our small boat through. You would not know him now. But still he died nobly, so cover him over with violets of pride, purple from Severn side. Cover him soon, and with thick-set masses of memoried flowers, hide that red, wet thing I must somehow forget.
In February, Gurney's battalion moved to the Ablancourt sector and followed the German strategic withdrawal eastward from village to village.
Now, youth, the hour of thy dread passion comes. Thy lovely things must all be laid away, and thou, as others, must face the riven day unstirred by rattle of the rolling drums or bugle's strident cry. When mere noise numbs the sense of being, the fierce-sick soul doth sway. Remember thy great craft's honour, that they may say nothing in shame of poets. Then the crumbs of praise the little verse-men joyed to take shall be forgotten. Then they must know we are, for all our skill in words, equal in might and strong of mettle as those we honoured. Make the name of poet terrible in just war, and like a crown of honour upon the fight.
At Caulaincourt, 2 companies of the Gloucesters, including Gurney's, sheltered in a mausoleum in the graveyard, the only building still standing in the village. On the 31st of March, the battalion reached Vermont. On Good Friday night, Gurney was wounded in the arm, and this necessitated a 6-week stay in hospital in Rouen.
Lying flat on my belly, in clutch frost, there was time to watch the stars. We had dug in. Looking eastward over the low ridge, March scurried its blast at our senses. No use either dying or struggling. Low woods to left, Cotswold spinneys, if ever, showed through snow flurries and the clearer star weather. And nothing but chill and wonder lived in mind, nothing but loathing and fine beauty, and wet clothing. Here were thoughts, cold smothering, and fire desiring. A day to follow like this, in digging or wiring.
In August 1917, the Gloucesters moved north to the Ypres front. By early September, they were in Saint-Julien, facing Passchendaele Ridge. Ivor Gurney was gassed. In September 1917, he was evacuated from France to the Bangor War Hospital near Edinburgh. There he met and fell in love with one of the nurses, Anne Nelson Drummond. He wrote about his love for Anne in a letter to his friend Howells.
Anne Nelson Drummond is older than I thought. born sooner, I mean. She's 30 years old and most perfectly enchanting. She has a pretty figure, pretty hair, fine eyes, pretty hands and arms and walk. A charming voice, pretty ears, a resolute little mouth. With a great love in her, she's glad to give when the time comes. In hospital, the first thing that would strike you is her guarded flame. There was a mask on her face more impenetrable than on any other woman I've ever seen. But that has gone for me. In fact, at a guess, I think it will disappear now she has found one whom she thinks worthy.
It was in the same year, with the help of Marion Scott, that Gurney's 46 war poems were published by Sidgwick and Jackson under the title of Severn and Somme. And Herbert Howells transcribed 2 of Gurney's songs for orchestra, both of which were performed at the Royal College of Music concerts in 1917 and 1919. Gurney left Bangor in the care of Miss Drummond and was sent on a signalling course in Northumberland. The conditions there, as well as the lack of camaraderie he had found in France, led to a decline in his mental health, and his old symptoms of neurasthenia returned. In 1918 he returned to hospital and then on to convalesce in Branspeth Castle, County Durham. His spirits revived and he started composing again. In late March 1918 he wrote to Marion Scott.
Yesterday I felt and talked to, I am serious, the spirit of Beethoven. No, there is no exclamation mark behind that, because such a statement is past ordinary ways of expressing surprise. But you know how sceptical I was of any such things before. It means I have reached higher than ever before, in spite of the dirt and coarseness and selfishness of so much of me. Something happened the day before which considerably lessened this and lightened my gloom. What it was, I shall not tell you. But it was the strangest and most terrible spiritual adventure. This letter is quite sane, n'est-ce pas?
By May 1918 his mental condition worsened and he was sent to Lord Derby's War Hospital, Warrington. Here he was described as suffering from a nervous breakdown from deferred shell shock. Around this time Anne Drummond ended her friendship with Gurney and he fell into a black despair. On the 19th of June he wrote farewell letters.
I know you would rather know me dead than mad.
He wandered off to a canal, but the courage to end his life failed him, and he was escorted back to hospital, pleading with the doctors to send him to an asylum. From July 1918 he was a patient at the Middlesex War Hospital until he was discharged from the army in October, 3 months later. On the 11th of September he sent Marion Scott a draft of his poem The Poplar, which was later published in his anthology War's Embers.
A tall, slim poplar that dances in a hidden corner of the old garden. What is it in you makes communion with the wind of autumn, the clouds, the sun? You must be lonely amidst round trees with their matron figures and stubborn knees, casting hard glances of keen despite when the lone girl dances silvery white. But you are dearer to sky and earth than lime trees, plane trees of meaner birth. Your sweet sky beauty dearer to us than tree folk, worthy, censorious.
After his release from the army, Ivor went back to live with his parents in Gloucester. He found little affinity with his family and contemplated going off to sea and tried to get work on the ships. He was finally dissuaded by his friend Edward Chapman not to go. His creative spirit returned and his mental health improved. The armistice arrived. His second volume of poems, War's Embers, was accepted for publication. Harvey returned home after being reported dead, and he and Gurney gave a recital in Stroud.
Yes.
In the spring of 1919, Gurney's condition improved further. He was invited by the Royal College of Music to take up his scholarship once again, this time to study under Dr. Ralph Vaughan Williams. He rented rooms in London, but later moved out to High Wycombe. This was to become the happiest, most fruitful and creative period of his life.
When from the curve of wood's edge does grow power, and that spreads to envelop me, wrapped up in sense of meeting tree and plough, I feel tiny song stir tremblingly and deep. The many birth pangs separate, taking most full of joy. For soon shall come the kindling, the beating at heaven's gate, the flood of tide that bears strongly home. Then under the skies I make my vows, myself to purify and fit my heart for the inhabiting of the high house of song that dwells high and clean apart. The fire, the flood, the soaring, these, the three that merged our power of song and prophecy.
Gurney's music was now being performed, and many of the poets he admired, such as Shanks, Gibson and Bridges, began to acknowledge his poetry. In November 1919, the poet John Masefield invited Gurney and Harvey to his home in Oxford. Masefield admired both Gurney's collection of war poems in his published War's Embers and his songs. If Gurney had been able to sustain a stable mental condition, he would have become known as a gifted poet and a composer of superb quality. But, as 1920 passed, Gurney spent less time at the Royal College of Music and more time on long hikes to escape London. He needed the Royal College of Music for discipline, but he needed his beloved Gloucestershire to inspire him too. When visiting Harvey at the Redlands in Minsterworth, Gurney's ramblings, both day and night, resumed. The years 1919 and 1920 were extremely creative and productive for Gurney. He composed 60 songs in 1920, saying to his friends, "Words, I must have words." In addition to the songs, he completed a string quartet, pieces for piano, the orchestral war elegy, and was working on the major song cycles Ludlow and Team and the Western Playland, the first of which was recognised as a masterpiece. During this time, Gurney was unable to hold down any permanent job in London, and in the summer of 1921 he left the Royal College of Music for good and went to live with his aunt, Edith Gurney, at Longford, on the outskirts of Gloucester. His mental health deteriorated and the voices returned, but he carried on with his compositions. His night wanderings and dishevelled appearance prompted speculation amongst the neighbours. He managed to get a job as a tax clerk in Gloucester, but that only lasted 3 months.
I can't hear you! I can't hear you! Speak up! Speak up! Speak up! Where are you transmitting from? I can't hear you! I can't hear a word! Speak up! Are the German lines down? Are they? Ronald, what are you doing here?
I've come to take you home, Ivor.
Come on, Ivor. Ethel's waiting in the kitchen.
Ivor moved in with his brother Ronald and his new bride Ethel Gurney, but soon his behaviour became intolerable, and he was sent to Barnwood House in Gloucester, a mental institution, suffering from a systematised delusional insanity. While he was there, he made 2 unsuccessful attempts to escape. In September 1922, Gurney was taken by car to the City of London Mental Hospital, Dartford, Kent, where he was to spend the rest of his life.
Harvey, look at this.
What is it, Ivor?
Crickly. Crickly. Do you remember the path through the woods to the quarry we used to take? Harvey, you have to get me out of here. I have to be free. I need to see the fields. I need to feel the wind. I need to see flowers, trees. Harvey, you've got to get me out of here. Get me free. If I can't go back to Crickley, let me die. Let me die.
Why have you made life so intolerable, and set me between 4 walls where I am able not to escape meals without prayer, for that is possible only by annoying an attendant? And tonight a sensual hell has been put upon me, so that all has deserted me, and I am merely crying and trembling in heart for death, and cannot get it. And gone out is part of sanity, and there is dreadful hell within me, and nothing helps. Forced meals there have been, and electricity, and weakening of sanity by influence that's dreadful to endure. And there is orders, and I am praying for death, death, death. And dreadful is the indrawing or outbreathing of breath, because of the intolerable insults put upon my whole soul. Gone out, every bright thing from my mind, all lost that ever God himself designed. Not half can be written of cruelty of man on man, not often such evil guessed as between man and man.
Ivor Gurney died on the 26th of December 1937 at the age of 47. He had spent 15 years incarcerated in the asylum. He was buried in the little graveyard at St Matthew's Church, Twigworth, near Longford.
The songs I have are withered or vanished clean, yet there are bright tracks where I have been, and there grow flowers for others' delight. Think well, O singer, soon comes night.